Hello, in this video, we will introduce instance and static members. A static variable is shared by all objects of the class. A static function cannot access instance members of the class. The data fields used in the classes before this section are known as instance data set fields or instance variables. An instance variable is tied to a specific instance of the class. It is not shared among objects of the same class. Every object has a copy of that instance variable. So this is instance variables are independent from the instance variables in the other objects. For example, suppose you want to create a so-called object. Here's so-called 1. There's another so-called object, so-called 2. So so-called 1 has radius by default, that's value is 1. And so-called 2 has this instance variable radius with the value 5. So they are all independent. Now, if you want all instances of a class to share data, use static variables. Static variables are also known as class variables. Static variables store values for variables in a common memory location. All the objects of the same class share that memory location. So let's look at this example here. We are going to add a new data field in the so-called class, number of objects. We use this to track the number of objects created in your program. So this number of objects is static, is shared by all the objects of the same class. You can also define instance function. This is get number of objects. It returns the number of objects. So let's see what happens here from this diagram. This is the UML diagram. Static members are underlined. So this are static, denoted as static. So now we're going to use this. Before you create any objects from the so-called class, number of objects is 0. It's initialized to 0. So now let's create one object. Now the number of objects becoming 1. Let's create another so-called object. The number of objects becoming 2. So look, radius. Each object has its own radius. But all these objects can see this number of objects is 2. So there's only one memory location for this static member. So we can put this in this program here. In the header file, when you declare a static member using the keyword static. So this is for static function, get number of objects. This is for static data field. It is number of objects. Now we're going to implement the so-called class, call this file as so-called with static data fields. And you have to now initialize the static member from the .cpp file. This is number of objects is assigned to 0. So please note that here its number of objects is in the so-called class, and also this is the data type here for this number of objects. number of objects is declared in the header file. This is static. So you have to initialize it in the implementation file. So this is the constructor. Whenever you construct an object, you have to increase the number of the objects by 1. So this is to increase it by 1. Now this is get number of objects, return number of objects. So please note that in the implementation file, you don't use anything like a static here. Only in the header file, when you declare it, you declare it as static. So now we're going to put this into a test program. So the test program here is the main. So here is circle with static data fields.h. And what is this number of circle objects created? So this, you can now use circle dot get number of objects. So this is 0. You haven't created anything. So now we created 1. So now we can get the number of objects. So here's a circle, colon, colon. So this is a static function. You can invoke it directly from this class. So here's a circle 2, create it. So this right now, it should be 1. You have a circle 2 created. So now invoke this, get number of objects. Now, so you have this circle 1, the radius changed, but circle 2's radius is not changed. So let's get to the circle 1's number of the get number of objects. You can invoke it this way here is circle 1 dot get number of objects. So this is fine, but it's not good. You should use circle colon colon instead, because using this syntax, clearly you know this get number of objects is static. So you'll not be confused with, oh, it might be instance. No. So same thing here, circle 2 dot get number of objects. It's better, you should do this. So, and I ask you to use this syntax and rather invoke it from an object, because it's a static, and so it really makes your code easy to read. So how do you decide whether a variable or a function should be instance or static? A variable or function that is dependent on a specific instance of the class should be an instance variable or function. For example, radius. Every circle has its own radius. Get area. So you have used radius to compute the area. Get perimeter, set radius. So these are all instance. However, this number of objects is not dependent on any specific instance. It should be declared static. That is all for this section on instance and static members. See you on the next video.